Hi, I'm John Mandeville, one of the coaches from the Collab 365 Academy, and today I'm going to demystify the Dataverse for you. The first thing I want to say is before we start to think about the Dataverse, we're often asking ourselves, why should I bother? I've got SharePoint, I've got Excel, I've got a few different places that I can store information already that don't cost me anything and actually are quite simple. So to address the question of the Dataverse, let's first of all pull out the topics that are going to help you get to grips with the idea of it. We're going to talk about four different things. We're going to talk about complexity, concurrency, security, and the big one, cost. Before I do, I want you to click like and subscribe and make sure you keep coming back if you like the content that I'm sharing with you. If you're anything like me, you've skipped straight to that last one and you've gone, the cost is the most important thing, John, and I'm going to tell you that actually, if you start to consider those other three things, how complex your needs are, how much you need to access your data at the same time, and who you need to be careful with when they're accessing data, you're going to get a much better decision and a much better understanding of what the Dataverse is and what it isn't, and what it is compared to your other data sources like SharePoint. Think about those things first, which is why I'm going to show you here first. Then you'll start to make that choice about cost. Let's dig into an example and have a look at those three things in light of some data. We all know SharePoint, right? We all know Microsoft Lists. They're plenty good enough. A few features of these that really help you when you're storing data. You can store 30 million rows in a list. That's more than enough. So my use case here, you can see, I kind of like rock, specifically AC/DC. I've got a whole bunch of data that I've put into a list here. Challenge comes if I've got more than 5,000 rows at one time and I want to view them. To prevent performance issues, you have to take some tactical measures behind the scenes with SharePoint. You can view more than 5,000 rows, you can store up to 30 million, but you start to use that amount of data in an app, things start to get a little bit more tricky. Does the performance actually degrade when I've got my favourite 100,000 rock hits of the 70s to the 2020s stored? Well, yeah, if you don't take specific actions with your list behind the scenes, you may well observe that your app starts to slow down when it pulls this data in. Your Dataverse storage, however, is tailor-made to be both performant and accept large amounts of data. You can size these things to suit. No performance issues like we might see in SharePoint if we don't take special measures. The important other thing there is that, well, okay, who's got 100,000 records that they want to store in a database? I don't need that, John. Maybe you don't. Maybe all you want to do is store AC/DC records in your collection, and you'd be right, by the way, to do that. Maybe you want to have a few more artists than just that one, and you want to keep those artists in a table and record titles of the records in another with the dates that you bought them and lots of other good info. And that is fine using SharePoint lists. You can have what's called lookup columns. So over here, if I just show you what that looks like, you can select a lookup column to go and link two lists together. You choose the type lookup, you choose the lists. All good. SharePoint's got a hard limit of 12 lookup columns. Again, I'm hearing you thinking, do I ever need more than 12 lookup columns? Well, okay, maybe not, but let's just take a scenario. If your data's complex, if it's interrelated with perhaps multi-dimensional links between tables, it's going to make you think harder about the Dataverse. I'll just unpack that a little bit because the Dataverse is built for complex relationships. So if I flip back here, we've still got the idea of a lookup column in Dataverse. So we know our data is in tables. We can have a lookup column which effectively will join two tables together with a relationship. Our tables can have what's called one-to-many or many-to-one or many-to-many relationships. But put simply, I might have a record in this table which links to an artist in another table. My artist, the relationship, there's one of those. There are many records. What I also might have is I might have something like a t-shirt ordering list, and actually the types of t-shirts I've got there in that big old table, well, it has a lookup again to my artists so that I can only select artists to make orders for their t-shirts. That control that you've got over the lookups and the relationship is unique to the Dataverse. You can set it up in SharePoint, but here's an example where it might let you down. I've now got my lovely big fat set of vinyl and I want to go and play to a huge crowd of headbangers at an event. I'm going to need some event information, so perhaps an event list. I'm going to need my playlists, I'm going to need my artists, I'm going to need my venue details. Maybe I'm going to need ticket details. I want customers, I want retail prices, I want merchandise tracking, and I want more. I want everything. And you know what? I want to have this data have proper relationships to each other. So that if I play Ronnie James Dio, I want to know who the customers are who picked him as their favourite artist and send them a mail shot to offer the t-shirt for Dio at a discounted pre-event price. You can achieve both of these things in SharePoint, Lists and in the Dataverse. However, here's the kicker. In my scenario, my DJ partner just dropped, and can you believe this, dropped Iron Maiden from the playlist. The moment that happened in the Dataverse, all items that were linked to that artist, if the relationships were set up properly, either get updated to Meatloaf, because they just edited it, or if they remove the record entirely and he no longer exists, Iron Maiden no longer exist in my table, and I've set it up correctly, the related records in all other tables via their relationships also get removed. No rock orphans, no pile of Iron Maiden t-shirts at my first ever gig that nobody wants, leaving me out of pocket. Try setting that up in a SharePoint list and believe me, you're going to be throwing your laptop out the window in about 14 hours time when you've struggled with it, you've wrestled with it and you've realised that actually what happens is if somebody updates one list, that lookup to the other list does not change the data in the other list immediately. You end up with orphans, you end up with stuff that you don't need in that original list and you go, how am I going to sort that out? Dataverse, you set it up properly and it will solve that problem out the box for you. So enough with the rock analogies, you get the idea. The key things here, those first 2 points I mentioned at the start of this video, is that the Dataverse is built to handle high levels of complexity in your data. So lots of different interlinked pieces of data, but also it's built to handle concurrency of both access and updates, supporting more users simultaneously without performance being ruined. It just is out the box. SharePoint is a different horse on a different course. Just bear that in mind when you're making your choice based upon those first two aspects. The third one is security. If you want complete control over not only the categories that people can see, maybe the tables that they can see, but down to the data items, the columns, you have to go for the Dataverse. SharePoint just doesn't have this level of granular security in the same way. So an example here on screen is I'm looking at my table. Let's create a new column in this table. Let's call it a secure column. Could be anything, could be any piece of data. It's a single line of text. Let's just use a number. Maybe it's a price or something like that. You've got options here to enable column level security out the box when you create these columns. What that will do is allow you to assign different groups of people different levels of permission and then assign those permissions to be allowed to see certain columns or not. I'm not going to show you that in detail here in this video today, but I just want you to know that that is absolutely possible in the Dataverse. It is possible to a level in SharePoint. As you can see, this is just saving, but it is possible to a level. But what you'll need to think about is in SharePoint, it's list level security. So that whole bunch of data in that list can be hidden from certain people. You can even go down to rows and say only allow people to see things that they added. But when it comes to specific columns for specific roles, specific data items, you really only have that one choice, which is the Dataverse. You've also got back at the table level the idea of forms and views. All this really means is a form is where you can interact with data, change data, update data. A view is where you can see data. That's like a read-only view. You can set these up and configure them so certain people can view certain bits of information based upon their security role. Certain people are allowed to update the data, again, based upon their security role. A much more granular and actually user-friendly way of managing the permissions on the information that you want to expose. So I encourage you strongly to go and dig into that use case, that need for you and for your application, and decide if, hey, do I need that? Do I not need that? Do I need scale? Do I need complexity? Do I need concurrency? If the answer to a lot of those is yes, then you're going to want to reach for the final part of this video, which is all about cost. So here's the thing, it does come down to cost for a lot of people, but if you just wind back your decision process, you don't go into a shop thinking, how much am I going to spend today? You go, what shop do I need? What products do I need from that shop? then how much is that going to cost me? And so the same process applies here. If you've gone through all that video and you're still thinking, yeah, that probably does make sense for me in my app, well, then go and research the cost. The cost will be different for you, but I'll just give you a ballpark, which I don't think in my time has gone too far up or too far down. But you get Dataverse capacity, the capability to use this tool, through other licenses. So like Power Automate licenses, you get one, as you can see on screen here, through a Power Apps premium license. We've got a per user premium license. What that means is me, John Mandeville, or actually my service account, can build apps in an environment, one environment only, and I'll get Dataverse capacity. But for like $20, this is 16, 17 pounds UK per month, we can do that. So I can do that for all the apps that I want to do. Equally, if you've just got one app that you want to assign this license to, you can do that kind of model licensing as well. But broadly speaking, the big headline is you're talking probably $20 per month for an individual person to unlock this capability to build an app for you, to allow that app to be used by other people. Behind the scenes, it can sit on the Dataverse data. So if $20 is better than £1,000 wasted on a Ronnie James Dio t-shirt stock order, then this is for you. If you don't need that, and you don't need the complexity, and you don't need the concurrency, SharePoint and Lists is still a fantastic choice. I say still, it always has been. So it's about the right horse for the right course. That's the key message I wanted to get across in this video. So if you've liked it, do subscribe, do like it, and come back for the next one, and I'll see you again very soon.